Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Joe Cohen, co-founder and CEO of Infinite Machine. Where are you dialing in from today, Joe?
Hey, I'm dialing from Brooklyn, New York.
Awesome. Is that where Infinite Machine is based?
Yes, we are based out here. We're moving to Long Island City soon, but for now we're in Greenpoint.
Very cool. That's one of my favorite neighborhoods in New York. Well, I'm super excited for this episode. Joe is a Wharton undergrad alum, so we're very excited to have him back on the podcast and be part of the Wharton community again. Before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty, I would love for you to describe what is Infinite Machine, what is the product, and sort of how is it disrupting the mobility space?
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Big fan of the podcast and what you guys are doing at the MBA program. At Infinite Machine, our goal is to make the best non-car vehicles in the world and to really reimagine urban transportation and to accelerate what we call a post-car future for cities. We believe that the future of transportation in cities is not cars, even electric ones. It's smaller, smarter vehicles that take advantage of new technologies, new design, and really unlock cities for people. Our first product is called P1. It is a high-end seated electric scooter, similar to a Vespa, but from the future. It's got amazing performance and amazing design, tech throughout. And it really started as a passion project for my brother and I. So I started the company. My brother is also a Wharton undergrad alum, and he and I started working on this as a COVID project. We wanted to make a replacement for our gas Vespas, which we've had for over a decade in New York, and found them to kind of change our experience of the city to have wheels and be unencumbered by congestion and parking constraints and things like that. But really a product that hasn't changed in 60 years. And so we started working on this as a side project during COVID. We were living together, and over 3 years of iterating, tweaking, kind of finessing this with a small group of engineers and designers, we built P1 and we started to show it to people, and the reaction was overwhelming. And we realized that we can actually bring excitement to the category of non-car mobility in a way that hadn't been done before. And that moreover, the category of non-car electric mobility was still, even though it was very large and growing very quickly, there's still no leader in the space. There's still no great American brand building the best products in the category, and that was a wide open field. So we made the plunge, went full time in January, had a small team, raised capital from Andreessen Horowitz, American Dynamism, and we will be shipping vehicles next year. That's really the high level of it. And over time, we'll be building out the fleet of vehicles that we offer and really pushing the envelope of the ecosystem around it and the way that we produce and distribute them.
Super exciting. I definitely have a ton of follow-up questions, which I know we'll dive into. But before that, I would just love to level set a little bit more in terms of like, what is your background? And you kind of described why you wanted to start Infinite Machine, but I'm curious, like, what was the route to get you there?
Yeah, I don't have any official qualification to be doing what I'm doing. One of the reasons I like being an entrepreneur is you don't need to ask for permission, and it's an excuse to learn about a thing that you're passionate about. So prior to this, I started a company called Universe, which is a very simple to use website building platform that's designed for mobile phones. So you can create a full on website e-commerce store from a phone. That company is still active. I'm the chairman there, stepped down from a full time role in January to go to Infinite Machine. I was actually on the podcast for Universe a few years ago. And I'd say the common thread between this company and Universe is that they're both using design to unlock technology for people. Universe was about enabling creation. How do you become a builder of the internet and not just a consumer of the internet? Infinite Machine is about how do you explore your city unencumbered? How do you make the experience of your urban environment something that's frictionless, something that is inspiring, and that's kind of adding value as opposed to kind of soul sucking, and really rethink the built environment through new technology and design. So that's kind of the common thread. Before Universe, I started another company straight out of college, which was a learning management system company called Lore. And that too was about bringing design thinking to a neglected category, which was education software. So really, the arc of my career has been about pursuing my curiosities, using kind of rigorous thinking around technology and engineering, as well as how do you use design to kind of expose that technology? And then obviously, how do you build a business around it? And so it's the intersection of those three things. One thing I'll just add on Infinite Machine and why we felt like we were qualified to be building this space, even though we're not motor engineers, is because a lot of the infrastructure over the past 10 years for EVs has come online in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago. So, for example, battery technology exists, motor technology exists, battery management systems, motor controllers, the supply chain for a lot of these components, they exist in a way that they didn't a decade ago, which means that we can really focus as product designers on the application layer, on the product layer, and not have to consume tons of resources and time on the infrastructure. If we were building even an e-bike 10 years ago, we would be obsessed with batteries. That's all we'd be doing. And we'd be spending tens of millions of dollars just on batteries. We don't need to do that in our category. And we can bring to market vehicles with an order of magnitude less capital at an order of magnitude higher quality by really focusing on the customer experience, the product experience. My thesis personally is that when nascent markets come online, they often start as supply constrained. So EVs 10 years ago were supply constrained. If you were able to make an EV, you could sell it. Fast forward 10 years, we're no longer supply constrained. Many companies can make EVs, but we're demand constrained. Do people want to buy your EVs? Do people want your product? So the constraint has shifted from can you make it to do people want it? And where Eddie and I like to spend our time is making things people want and really playing the role of designer in creating something that people really want. And I think in that way, we're at a similar moment to where the app world was 10 years ago when a lot of core infrastructure had come online to do that. So that's kind of the background. I will say that while Eddie and I started the company, we have a co-founder named Zach who runs engineering and is a brilliant vehicle engineer and inventor, wizard. We've been working with him for years at this point. And so he's bolstered our competency and we've learned a ton from him, as well as a design partner who's helped us learn how you design vehicles. So we have an incredible team now that has helped us learn the things that we don't know. And there's still a lot that we don't know. And we look at this as kind of an open-ended adventure that we're learning on the fly with and trying to benefit from mistakes that other people have made so that we don't repeat them.
It's super exciting to see sort of the growth in the industry because if you think about Ford and Model T, they were building so many of the components for many years. So it's exciting to see that just within 10 years, you're now able to become an integrator of systems rather than a builder of systems, which is very exciting for the market itself. One thing I want to just kind of press on and get your thoughts on is what has changed from being a first time, second time, and now a third time founder in your journey? What lessons have you maybe learned that you're now applying to like the Infinite Machine sort of trajectory and path?
It's a great question. I think about it every day because while each of these businesses is very different in what they do, all of them are about leading a group of people to do a thing that hasn't been done, an exciting, ambitious future, a vision, and getting there with a limited amount of resources on a fast timeline. So there are similar dynamics across all of them. I think I've become a much better leader and manager. I think that there are kind of innumerable lessons. So it's hard for me to share a specific one. If you ask about some specific area, about product, about ops, about fundraising, I can share more, but I hope that I'm 10 years wiser for having had the experiences. And one thing I'll say is entrepreneurship is often thought of as Wharton was the first business school in the world. I think it was founded in like the 1890s. And at the time, the idea of teaching business was thought of as like, oh, you can't teach business. It's like a snake oil salesman thing. And Joseph Wharton kind of turned it into a science. But entrepreneurship is actually different. It's not a science in the way that kind of professional business is. However, it is still a profession. And there are still dynamics to being an entrepreneur. There's still skills. There's still a craft to it in the way that there's a craft to being an artist. If you want to be a painter, you need to know about color and shading and how materials mix with each other. With being an entrepreneur, you need to understand people. You need to understand economics. You need to understand supply chains, marketing, fundraising, all these things. And I do think you can just get better and better at it. And I think in each of these areas, trying to find that line, and you don't want to overlearn from things that didn't work because sometimes it's just exogenous for why something fails. And sometimes it's exogenous for why something succeeds. It's finding that line. Universe was a completely remote company. We're doing this one totally in person. So that's been a shift. This is obviously a physical products company. Universe is all digital. It means that you need to be much more conscious of costs. Everything's more expensive. Everything's operationally more difficult, but the business model is simpler. Instead of trying to figure out how you make money, you're selling a product. It's clear. I think your judgment on people gets better, both in assessing them and obviously in growing them and working with them. And yeah, I mean, those are some things, but happy to chat about anything in
Yeah.
specific.
No, I think I just kind of wanted to get a general overview. And I know I'm going to ask about funding later, so maybe we can kind of recircle to that idea at a later point in the podcast. But now I kind of want to talk a little bit about the products. I think it's quite cool. You have this vision around sort of non-car transportation, right? And that's obviously sort of a big segment because it could be anything from taking the metro to an e-bike to a scooter. Why did you guys sort of align on the form factor of a sit-down scooter like a Vespa over, say, maybe an e-bike?
It started really out of personal experience. We had found that the high performance, call it like in the gas world, like a 150cc scooter was really this workhorse general purpose vehicle. You could ride it throughout a city, but you could also go over the bridge if you need to. You can keep up with cars because a lot of our cities are still car dominated, but you got the benefits of having two wheels. You can cut through traffic. You can park anywhere between two cars or whatever. It was something that worked with where urban infrastructure is today, but gave you a taste of the future. I will be honest, we didn't do a market analysis to start and say, hey, here's the white space. And the thing is, as consumers, we were using vehicles in this form factor. We were unsatisfied by the options available. We started working on a better version as a passion project. And then the more we learned about it, the more we realized there was a business opportunity here. One thing I will say, though, is we will make vehicles for the car lane and the bike lane. Um, More to come on that front. And I'm a big proponent of alternative infrastructure, the bike lanes. And I do think that the future of the city is more in the bike lane than anywhere else.
That's amazing. As a New York resident, I would love to see a car-free Lower Manhattan. So
Exactly.
that is a vision that I certainly align to.
And Paris, by the way, you're saying you were there earlier, like they've taken a leadership role in removing cars from a lot of parts of town and building up alternative infrastructure. It's going to happen. New York is instituting congestion pricing. It's just a necessity. As you have more and more urban density, there's just no room for all these cars. You have massive congestion. It's getting worse and worse. Like I was thinking about it the other day, like if you are a emergency medical provider, like if you're an ambulance or a fire truck, those I think are going to be some of the functions that actually go smaller first because it's a matter of life or death whether they can kind of bust through gridlock. To me, it's an inevitability that vehicles will get smaller. We're going to have less cars on highly congested areas and highly dense areas.
It's impressive in Paris to see how they build the infrastructure and then people come. Like the amount of people using e-bikes was almost mind-boggling. Most people I talked to was like, yeah, I never take the car around because it's a huge pain in the ass to do so. So why would I?
Exactly.
But I guess on the flip side, one thing that I am somewhat concerned about, I am a motorcycle rider, so I love life on two wheels. So it's something I definitely sort of understand and enjoy. But for a lot of people, it's kind of a barrier that they're scared about. Even a lot of my friends who live in New York, taking city bike is like, oh my God, you have all these incidences that you hear. And so there's a big cultural, I think, aspect in the United States, particularly around life on two wheels. So I'm curious how you're thinking about overcoming that cultural aspect and maybe getting people to try your product and understand it and see it, given that that maybe is like a barrier to growth in the future.
No, it's a great question. Look, I think there's two aspects of this. Number one is how do we make our vehicles the safest two-wheelers in the world? And so for P1, that's pushing the envelope of what's possible. We have ABS in all these vehicles. We have cameras on the front and the back. We have visual alerts for the riders. But I think outside of just how do you make them safer, it's perception. And I do think that one of our core theses is you need an American company to Americanize two-wheelers in this way. It's going to be hard for a European company or an Asian company to bridge that cultural divide. And to me, that's not just about safety. It's also about, does this company understand me? Does this company understand the city I live in, the infrastructure that I have? So in some ways, similar to how Starbucks kind of Americanized espresso, we're taking a little bit of a page from that. European countries as well as some Asian countries have led when it comes to scooter adoption. And it is the most practical way to get around a city. But in the US, it has not been as big as it's been in other markets. And so we want to try and play that role for being the cultural kind of bridge into it. And I will say, though, that e-bike usage is skyrocketing in the US, and it's the biggest market globally for e-bikes. And that's going to continue growing. And that's the gateway drug for new modalities. And if you think about it, an e-bike and a motorcycle, we think of them as totally different. But actually, if you think about it, they're pretty close. They're two-wheelers with motors on them. One is operable by pedals and one's operated by a throttle. But the big difference is one has an engine that's loud and it's big and it's heavy, and the other is silent and it's electric. Electric propulsion has allowed us to rethink the way that perception happens with non-car vehicles. And I think that's the big difference, actually. Because these things are silent, because they're more accessible, because they're lighter and smaller, you can actually make more approachable form factors that are less intimidating. And we get to do it over. The first motorcycles looked like e-bikes. We're in this moment now where, because we have a new technical platform in electric drivetrains, we get to choose a different course for how it evolves culturally.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. I've never thought about sort of like Americanizing the scooter. I guess what would be sort of some of the design feature that you talked about, sort of the cameras, the ABS, that from like a safety perspective, but what from like a design or sort of feature perspective would you kind of consider this to be more sort of adapted to the American market than say like a Vespa?
The way we think about it is Americans love cars. And you just take scooters, you ask the average American, what do you think of a scooter? They'd say it's dorky. I would never get on one of those. And maybe if you showed them a Vespa, they'd be like, oh, like if I lived in Milan, maybe I would ride one, but there's no way I'm getting on that in New York. So it starts with aesthetics, and it starts with making something that is cool and that kind of resonates with more American sensibility. So we wanted to push the envelope there and make something that you were struck by, but also really saying, if you look at micromobility, it's really a category that, from a design perspective, has been very utilitarian. So how do we take the frame of the bike and as minimal cladding as possible? And how do we do it super economically with plastic parts? The result is a lot of products that you don't really want. Whereas if you look at the car world starts from emotion. It starts from sketches of like, what is this form language? And like, what's the proportion going to be? In a way, we're actually taking a page from the car world and bringing it to the non-car world. Most of the car industry is driven by that emotion. It's driven by how it makes you feel. And that's true in the motorcycle category, but it's not true in urban mobility. And so we want to do that in this space. And then outside of just the romance of it, there is just the brutal functionality. So, for example, a Vespa is painted with auto body paint. So if you're in New York and someone parks right next to your bike and kind of hits you on the way out a little bit, your bike is going to not look great. If you drop it, it's going to get scratched and look crappy immediately. So the design is actually not fitted to a rough and tumble urban environment. It's actually much better for like the countryside or something like that. So with our design, we have all industrial materials, aluminum, steel, coatings that are industrial grade. This is not going to be a precious thing that will look bad even after some wear and tear and some patina. There's that kind of durability that we've thought about. And then there's just the technology. So this thing has a massive kind of automotive grade screen, touchscreen, cameras on the front and the back. It really should feel like your car in a way. So you get on it and it's got all modern stuff. And then finally, it's performance. It really rips. You get on it and compare it to even a 500cc motorcycle, you're going to feel a lot more pickup on this. The torque is instantaneous. It's silent. We wanted to make something that kind of was a little bit scary, like just scary enough to get you excited. Now, you don't have to put it in that mode, but you're able to. I think those things reflect a bit of an American sensibility. We're obviously Americans. We're based here in New York. And Infinite Machine is going to be a global company. We're going to be selling everywhere eventually. But we do think about it as reflecting our sensibilities and the way we think about kind of cosmopolitan existence.
Yeah. No, that's my only experience on electric scootering was on the Rebel scooters, and that definitely sort of like the performance was not ideal. I think it limited you from going over the Williamsburg Bridge or anything like that. And so
Exactly.
it kind of was not necessarily a fully usable tool in that sense. In terms of, you talk about the design aspect, is it almost like you're thinking of it like there was Van Moof and Cowboy in like the e-bike space? If you're familiar with those brands, are you sort of trying to take that design forward lens to the scooter space and then vice versa? Or you see yourself as kind of a completely different approach altogether?
We want to make the best products, and making the best products is about great design. It's about great technology. It's about great performance. We make tools. We make things that are exciting. We make things that are useful. We think that there have been some glimmers of great work in the micromobility space, but it's honestly been few and far between. We started the company because there's nothing we want to buy.
Right.
And we think that if you make really great stuff, you can grow the size of this market even faster and become the leader in it. Infinite Machine is not a scooter company. We make scooters, but we're going to make all kinds of vehicles. And we're really a bet on the category and about building the best products in the category and the best ecosystem around them. That's how we think about it.
Yeah. I saw that as part of this ecosystem, you have all these sort of accessories for the P1, like the speaker, the trailer, the cargo box. Is that sort of a core part of the product, is like the modularity aspect and sort of almost being able to change it in the way that you want? Or is that just, yes, a lot of motorcycles have accessories. So yeah.
100%. We think about modularity a lot. So yeah, P1, you can accessorize with different modules that you can attach to the rear. We're going to make a bunch of them. Other people will be able to make them, both other companies and just individuals. It's hackable. We wanted to make it something that you can modify to your own usage, and not just functionality wise, but also aesthetically. The panels are very easily removable. You can paint them, you can sticker them, you can replace them really easily. And so we think about that kind of modern sensibility, right to repair, all of that. It's very easy to work on. So that is a core value of ours. The overriding idea behind Infinite Machine is we're about autonomous humans. We want humans in the driver's seat and in control. That doesn't mean that we're against technology. We're going to embrace the latest and greatest in every area to empower people. When it comes to their products, like putting you in control of where you want to take it, if you want to mod it. And the ecosystem that we're building is about obviously physical accessories, and we're going to have a full suite, both on vehicle and on the rider, at various levels of intelligence. But we'll also build things for your city experience. So imagine things like charging stations and stuff like that. That will all come in time as well.
Is it able to be charged with like a traditional car charger, or is it sort of like a different
So P1 you charge with just a normal outlet, like a normal 110 volt outlet. And you'll be able to charge the vehicle by just plugging the vehicle into an outlet if you have a garage, or if you don't, you can take the battery out, it's fully removable, bring it to your apartment, plug it into the wall, and charge it overnight. And you have a huge range.
How quick does it take on a 110 to charge up completely, or
It'll take like 6 hours.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
overnight,
to 80%, even less. Yeah.
Wow. Now I kind of want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the design process and maybe even manufacturing. You mentioned you have this technical co-founder, Zach, who sort of comes from more of the engineering background. Is he sort of the one that's doing a lot of the design with so many other people on the team? And is that all done in-house, or are there other sort of parts of the design that are potentially outsourced? I know a lot of the components are probably from suppliers, but just the packaging and the design, is that something that sort of your team is leading wholeheartedly?
Yeah, so we do all the design ourselves internally. And when we say design, we mean not just the form, but all the mechanicals and all the functionality and how it all comes together. So it's really the design and mechanical engineering. And yeah, Zach is our leader on that. He's brilliant. We do have a few other designers and engineers internal. And then Eddie and I, we've been working on this project in some form for now over 4 years. So we've developed some knowledge about how you do this stuff. And I'd say it's kind of a small writer's room of designers working on this thing. And there's different phases. Like you start with a sketch, and it's just a two-dimensional illustration. And that kind of gives you a direction of what you want, but it doesn't actually work. It's just an idea. Then you're like, okay, can we make this work? Then you're going into basically 3D design. And then once you have a 3D design that's attractive, you want to prototype it. So you want to physically build one. You want to test it. You want to see what's working, what's not. And then you're going to iterate. So you're going to say, okay, this worked, this didn't work. You update the 3D design, build another prototype, test that. Once you lock in that prototype, then you make the go, no go decision. Do we want to productionize this? If you productionize it, then you need to design it for manufacture. Designing for manufacture is actually a whole other thing. So when you're designing for a prototype, you're really trying to make something that just works so you can get the idea of the product and get to a judgment about whether you should productionize it or not. But once you have made the decision to productionize it, everything needs to be re-engineered to support the wear and tear of a road going vehicle. It needs to adhere to homologation, which is road regulation. It needs to adhere to waterproofing, dustproofing, overcoming of hurdles and aggressive usage for tens of thousands of miles. And you have to, of course, adhere to like electrical and safety standards. So you basically need to go through a very extensive design for manufacturing process, which took us for P1 over a year. And then once you do that, you validate that. So you build one of those, you build basically a production prototype that uses low scale manufacturing techniques. So think like 3D printing and kind of hand bended metal parts, things like that. You then validate that design. You're like, okay, like this is working, this is not working. Once you validate it, then you open tooling. So that's like making molds, and those are expensive. That's probably the most expensive part of the pre-production process. And then once you make the molds, you make a build that uses the molded parts. You then validate that and fix anything that you need to. And then you make one more, and hopefully at that point, it's ready to go and you can enter mass production, but you might need to do one more cycle or two more cycles depending on where the product sits. So it's many cycles of iteration. And I didn't know that going into it, like what that process was like. So I've learned a lot of it. And we're still not through to having shipped production, mass production vehicles. So we're actually in the middle of that process right now. But we're getting close.
Yeah. Are you using like a contract manufacturer to do sort of like the heavy lifting? And where is that sort of going to be based in the future?
Yeah, so we made the decision that we were not going to open our own factory to start because we're a new company and we don't know what we don't know. And we want to be able to focus on the areas where we're really good, but work with partners who are really good at other areas. And especially when it comes to vehicles, reliability and safety is the most important thing. We wanted to work with folks who have experience doing this stuff. So we partnered with an amazing supplier and actually group of suppliers for all aspects of the vehicle. Everything on P1 is custom designed. The battery is custom designed. The seat is custom designed. The buttons that you control the turn signals are custom. The screen is custom. The lights are custom. Everything is custom. There are many different suppliers in the process of doing that, and they're all over the globe. And yeah, that's kind of how we approach it. So we're taking more of the Apple approach than the Tesla approach in how we think about manufacturing.
Yeah, makes sense. In terms of the way you're expecting to sell this in the future, I know that the P1 is open for pre-order at this point. Do you sort of expect to go kind of the Tesla model of manufacturer run sort of like dealerships? Is it going to be sort of direct to consumer online? Just trying to understand what the go-to-market motion will be.
Our current thinking on this is that we're going to go direct to consumer. We are going direct to consumer. We're a registered dealer in all 50 US states. We will do physical activations and retail experiences in our core markets. And we're also open to partnering with folks that make sense as we get into the world. But in the beginning, it's really important for us to control the customer experience, to learn from our customers, and to make sure our early customers have an amazing experience getting on our vehicles. And then once we think about globally and scaling globally, then it's a different ballgame and like how we want to approach that internationally. The balance is like, how do you prioritize the customer experience? How do you prioritize your own company learnings and how our brand comes across while also learning new markets and kind of having some humility in entering new markets? Because you mentioned a company like Van Move, that company went out of business in part because its cost got out of whack. And costs get out of whack when you try to verticalize prematurely in the production and when you try to verticalize too early in the distribution globally. It's just about in sequence, right? There are a lot of benefits to verticalizing, both economic and just from a quality and customer experience perspective. But if you don't do it at the right stage, it could actually have an adverse impact on all of those things, on the customer experience, on reliability, on the economics.
Do you always expect to go with like a direct ownership model in terms of the people buy it. There's a company, I don't know if you're familiar with, Dance, or in Europe, that kind of does the subscription model for e-bikes, and they handle the maintenance, the whatever sort of needs comes along the way. Would you also consider sort of like a program like that that's a little bit more sort of like subscription based?
We are product companies. So we make products, we sell those products. We will offer different ways of accessing those products. But in the immediate term, it's going to be an ownership model. We may do things like allowing our users to rent out their vehicles, or if you are a fleet operator and you want to provide infinite machine vehicles to your customers, yeah, we'd love to partner with you to do that. But that's a really different business, fleet management. And we're interested in making the best products and working with fleet providers where it makes sense.
Do you have sort of a sense right now within the US of where most of your customers are sort of like concentrated based off sort of like the pre-orders, or is you still kind of
Yeah,
figuring
New
out?
York, San Francisco, Miami, LA, Austin. It's kind of the predictable ones.
Yeah, makes sense. And now you sort of mentioned in the beginning that you guys just raised a seed round with A16Z and some others sort of participating, which is super exciting. What was, in kind of getting back to this concept of being a multiple time founder, was there anything that you sort of learned from this process in terms of raising capital that was different than your prior two businesses? Or was it completely different given that now you're raising for like a hardware company versus in the past it was software?
Hardware is different. I mean, at the end of the day, so I've raised probably 5 rounds of capital in my career, or maybe six, or including the most recent one. And I think there's what you're selling, there's the macro environment, and there's like how you're doing. So all those things kind of play into it. When we went out to raise, I'd say the macro environment for hardware, consumer hardware is not amazing. But we got to work with our top choice, which is A16Z and the American Dynamism Fund specifically. So we're really lucky there. Hardware businesses require more capital, and venture capital succeeds when you can have kind of asymmetric returns on investment, where you put in a few $1 million and that can be worth 100x that. The way that you do that is by being very capitally efficient. And I think what's interesting about where we are now with small EVs and with consumer hardware is that we can actually build what we call like an ultra lean hardware company. We have 10 people at Infinite Machine on our team, and we have contractors and part timers, but we're very lean and we're almost software scale. That's one thing that I've kind of taken from the software experience. So there's a lot of like cross pollination between my experiences. I've always been interested in hardware, but I wanted to do a software startup first because I felt like every company in the future would be a software company in some fashion. That is true. We are a software company, but we also build hardware. Fundraising is what it is. At the seed level, it's different than at the A. You want to find people who share your dream and who can be thought partners throughout. And we've been really lucky with the people that we've got so far, but we're just getting started.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. I think just to be able to raise in this environment, to your point, is a really good milestone and an exciting point to be at. So kudos there. I just kind of want to now pivot slightly into a little more of a career advice, given that we are an MBA podcast. For people who maybe don't have like a technical background or either in software or mechanical engineering, but are an MBA, how do you sort of recommend that they kind of break into some of these types of businesses? Is there anything that they should focus on while in their MBA program, or just kind of play to your strengths and just focus on go-to-market or some other things that are
Look, I
suited
think
to
the core
MBAs?
question is like, why? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because it's the hot, cool thing to do? Are you doing it because you think you can make a bunch of money on it? Are you doing it because you're really passionate about it? I think that integrity is contagious. I think passion's contagious. I think that it matters way more if you're kind of passionate and committed to a thing than if you have some credential. I would really kind of do a gut check on like, am I doing this thing because I'm intrinsically motivated by it, or do I think it's a means to an end in some way? And I think if you find the thing that you're intrinsically motivated by, then you will do the work of becoming native to that thing. And I think about becoming native as really two focuses. Number one is learning about the craft, being curious, acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know, realizing there are no dumb questions, surrounding yourselves with smart people, and being ruthless about learning. Number two is find the vector within that world where you can be the best, and then do that. If you can really bring an operational lens to that, build the most kick-ass operational thing. because that is very attractive to people who have complementary skill sets. Technical people want to work with people who can raise capital, who can design great things, who can build teams. But I also would think about it not in a transactional way, but really as to do anything hard, you need a complementary set of skills. And every player should be bringing something amazing to the table. And it should be extremely obvious to everyone there why that other person is there. So I'd say do a personal gut check first, understand if you're driven internally or externally, and really try and get to that internal place of motivation. Once you do that, then understand what is the lane that I can be the best in, be the best in it, and then be super curious and a hyper learner when it comes to the other stuff. Even though I don't have an engineering background, I'm reasonably well versed in kind of all the engineering aspects of our vehicle. And that's not because I'm leading engineering, but as the CEO of the company, there are strategic implications at all levels for the engineering and the technology. I go deep in that as it's needed. So I think the ability to zero in on a specific function that you might not be trained in is really valuable, while also then being that T-shaped person, leaning into the thing that you're good at.
Totally. Well, I think that's a great sort of note to end on. Hopefully people will take that advice and go run with it. So thank you again so much for joining the podcast, Joe. I really loved doing this episode.
Cool. Yeah, great.